So our first designer is Nick Hayes.
Howdy, you hear me all right? How's sound coming?
We're working on it.
Check, 1, 2. That sounds better, right?
There we go.
Howdy, I'm Nick Hayes. Use the presentation voice.
Yes. Your movie voice. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Nick.
I'm a key lead product designer at Mattel on the games team. I design board games and card games. I've been at Mattel 7 years. Prior to that, I was doing the same thing at Spin Master, which is another toy company out of Culver City. I was designing games there for 4 years. I also teach game design at Otis College of Art and Design. If you decided to go to that school, maybe you would have been one of my students in the toy program. But that's basically my professional background.
Awesome. We have Steed Sun.
I'll use my presentation. Hi, my name is Steed Sun. I've been in the toy business for over 20 plus years. I was at Mattel for a bunch of years, 20 plus years, mainly in the Hot Wheels team and on the entertainment design team. Since then, I've been to a multitude of smaller toy companies. I've been in the consumer products design. I was at Loot Crate for many years, for those of you who like subscription boxes and pop culture stuff. My latest gig is working on a TV animated show that I co-created, and I'm part of the creative director as well as the creative designer on the show as well. So pretty well-rounded, excited to be here, happy to answer any questions that you have, good or bad, right or wrong. Happy to help out young guys like you who are really, open to not only the toy industry but the design industry in general. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. So our next guest speaker, Maggie, we believe might be en route. So we have a substitute guest speaker.
My name is Eddie Hermosillo. As Nick mentioned, if you guys decide to go to Otis College, you would have been one of his students. I just graduated in 2021. I freelance and I've worked with Spin Master, do some side jobs, and Kelly will introduce himself in a minute. We started our own business, so we were entrepreneurs, and we founded and created Odd Frog Entertainment as well.
Awesome. Welcome. And Kelly is partner.
Yeah.
Yes.
Business partner.
Yep, I'm Kelly Greenwood. I kind of came to toy late in my career, I guess. I'm 46. I started small business when I was 22 years old and kind of custom interior design stuff. And loved it, was real proud of it, but I drove a lot and I hated that. So I decided to go back to school. I had always loved comic books and illustration, creating my own characters and stuff like that. And just decided, I'm done with this. I'm going to change gears and go to school to, pursue creative arts. And so I started with illustration at El Camino and then moved over to Otis Toy Design once I realized that existed. From there, I got picked up an internship at Mattel Toys, and I worked there for about 3 years after school. And after that, I've done freelance for Moose Toys and several other smaller toy companies. And then,
All right. So we're going to talk about toys and try to get an inside perspective here. And by toys, we're talking about toys, games, the whole spectrum. So I'm going to leave that up to you when you answer this. And if there are any questions that you feel like you can just pass on, feel free. So we're going to talk a little bit about skills required to be in the toy industry. What does it take to make toys? I'm going to start with you, Kelly.
For me, definitely a good foundation in drawing skills is key to design. That's especially my background because I'm an illustrator, but I think, it's so important if you're going to be brainstorming to be able to communicate using visual elements. So illustration, strong background in illustration would be the main thing I could think of. Character design, outside the box thinking. And you know, you got to think like a kid too, to a large degree. When we were going through Otis, a big part of it is child psychology. So you have to be able to relate to your audience on that level and understand who you're designing for. So, you know, a big part of it is putting yourself on the same level as the consumer that's going to be playing and engaging with it.
Yeah, sure. You know, I'm a little bit of a hybrid. You know, I started my career as an engineer. You know, I have a degree from USC with aerospace engineering of all things. I actually worked in the industry for a couple of years, found that incredibly boring. Sorry, aerospace industry. But you know, then I went back to school. I actually got an industrial design degree at Art Center in Pasadena. You know, I really got into industrial design. I really got into vehicles. I really got into drawing and sketching. You know, it was one of the passions of mine that I always wanted to follow through, even through high school and stuff like that. And so when I got the gig at Mattel, you know, it was really interesting because it allowed me to flex, you know, not only my creative skills, but my drawing skills and a little bit of that engineering skills too. You know, I assume most of you guys are in the industrial design field or want to be industrial designers. So the basic skill, I think it's the most important thing, like Kelly said, right? Your basic drawing, sketching, your fundamentals, which I'm sure you're taking now. But, you know, you need to get past that really fast, right? Because you really need to get to the next level, which is let your passion take over, let your creative skills take over. And then how do you manifest that into a really cool design? And that always shows. I always tell people that, you know, the basics is just the basics. You know, most of us, you know, all go to school for basics, but once you get past that, then you can really start having fun. Because then you really start bringing your vision to life and your creations to life. And I tell you, there's nothing more rewarding than having something in here and be able to like make it happen and make it physical, and it's so rewarding. It's so tactile to a certain degree, even in the digital age, because you know, back when we probably went to school, it was still very hands-on. You know, there was no digital, what's this 3D modeling stuff. So everything was very hands-on. But you know, I tell you, you know, that to me, that's the most rewarding part of being a designer. It's just being able to, you know, it's the ultimate. To me, it's the ultimate, right? It's the power of creation. It's to be able to have something in here and to be able to deliver that in every way possible, regardless of whatever roadblocks you're going to get. And you will get many roadblocks, as these guys will tell you, in the creation process.
Great.
They said it all really, but I'll add one thing. Knowing how to draw is paramount, and being creative is paramount, but that's 50% of the equation. The other half is being able to explain to other people what you were thinking, being able to present your ideas. Because a creative genius can sit here and come up with a bunch of great things at her desk with her head down, and no one knows what she's working on. But a designer has to be able to then convey to another person who isn't creative why it's good and what's so good about it. So the communication is important. Knowing how to draw it will only take you so far. Being able to explain what you're drawing is the other big key.
Excellent. And Eddie, being the
The rookie in the game, I mean, yeah, I agree completely with these guys. You have to have some sort of fundamental, foundational skills, but you also have to have like persistence and be dedicated to it. You have to have a passion for it, you know, because the skills will only get you so far. But if you don't have that passion and that drive to carry on, I mean, then you're not going to be able, like Nick said, be able to interpret your ideas or get those points across to make valid, you know, make your ideas validated and want to happen.
Awesome. Okay, we're going to talk about how the different segments, I don't think a lot of people necessarily appreciate or understand that the toy industry is definitely broken down into a lot of segments and micro segments. And from working in the industry, what do you see are the key differences and barriers or benefits?
So I'll just start with preschool toys. That's what I kind of started on, and that's that's different than everything else in the sense that everything is geared younger. So corners have to be designed with softer edges and rounder edges. Materials have to be able to go in somebody's mouth without poisoning them. The safety and compliance goes up and all that kind of stuff. So the preschool, stuff is its own section. And then like right now, Eddie and I are working in a very specific market, which is 1/12 scale action figures. So, that's geared towards really more like people Eddie and I's age who you don't have to worry about the edges as much and small parts as much. But in preschool, you're worried about all that stuff. Typically in the industry, you'll get this thing that looks like a little small shot glass. And if it fits inside that glass, you can't use it for preschool because that's the size that would go down like a child's throat. So in the preschool section, it's different than all the others in the sense that you're hyper aware that it's a much younger audience. And then for the 1/12 scale stuff, it's a collector market. They're typically older, so you're looking at people who grew up with toys like you grew up with, He-Man and G.I. Joe and stuff like that. And you can kind of dig in on the design elements a little more, make things a little more hyper detailed and stuff like that. So those are the two that I know.
Yeah, I don't want to get too logistical on this, but basically there is a couple of major categories, right? When you go to a toy store, there are categories, right? It's primarily broken down into boys' toys, girls' toys, games, activities, and a couple others. Collectibles these days. Collectibles is a big thing, like as these guys are saying. But all of those is the foundation of age groups, right? And as a child age, whether you're a 3-year-old preschooler versus a 5 or 6-year-old where you're into Hot Wheels, versus a 24-year-old where you're into 12-inch collectibles, which I'm sure.
That's a
So it's really the category is really broken up into the age group as a child grows and as you become from kids to adults and stuff like that. So primarily that's how that's broken up. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally right. Exactly right.
Do you know of any, similar to the younger audience, are there any other restrictions that you find in those segments that make it either a challenge for designing or kind of fertile ground?
Yeah. When in anything, when you're designing for anything you're designing a product, you're designing for a person, and the person you're designing for, their age is the primary indicator of what they can and can't do. And this is a big thing in toys and games is what the player, the user is capable of doing. Very young kids have low manual dexterity. They might be able to mash a button or put two things on top of each other, but they can't build a model airplane. They also can't read. It goes without saying. But you can't design a game, for instance, with cards with words if it's for kids who are 5 and younger because it's too much. I will say that even for adults, you don't want to have a lot of reading because no one wants to spend their time reading when they want to be playing. But yeah, regardless of the category, I think age, as Steve said, is the primary thing that gives you the guidelines on what you can and can't do with the design.
And just to piggyback off that a little bit, it changes who your consumer is too. So if you're in preschool toys, your real consumer is the parent that's buying the toys for their children. Whereas in collectibles, it's geared towards kind of the one-to-one. The person who's buying it is buying it for themselves.
Yeah, and I would also add to that, it's not just these are parameters, not just about being a toy designer, it's being an industrial designer, being a designer in general, right? It's always the end user that matters. So all the dexterity, all the, all that kind of stuff that, Nick and Kelly were talking about, it's really about towards the end user, whether it's a 3-year-old or a 20-year-old. When you get to the adult stuff, you're right, as you're getting into adult collectibles, man, you can go to town. You can have sharp edges, You can have all kinds of details,
lot less to
all,
worry
all
about.
kinds of fun stuff. So again, you're really, as a designer, you're really thinking about who am I designing this for, and what are those parameters that lock me into, to do this, don't do this, go here, don't go here, that kind of stuff. So it transcends just being a toy designer.
When my daughter was young, we inherited from an older relative some Polly Pockets, the like 3 3/4 ones, I think. And they had these cool like soft plastic clothes you could put on them and redress them. And we just thought she would love them, but she would get so frustrated not being able to manipulate her little hands enough to kind of get them on the arms and stuff. So you either had to sit with her all day to play with her, and that she would cry. So we removed them from the situation for about 6 months, and then reintroduced them, and she was totally fine. Like by that point, she had been able to, mature enough with her dexterity that she could actually have fun with the toys. So
There's actually a kind of a fine tuning of even as a parent choosing
Right.
absolutely,
which part of the segment they're in.
Mhm. It pays to look at the age range on that box for sure. Most of the time.
Okay, so since we've had a huge growth in online toy sales and direct from the company kind of thing, and we have traditional companies like Mattel and Spin Master still have huge inroads into into retail. What are you guys seeing as some of the differences as from the design side of how you develop a toy or a game, whether it goes for a retail, like having a buyer, or going direct to the consumer?
I can talk about that. I just recently worked on a game at Mattel called Future Me Problems. It's a game based off of a webcomic, Sarah Anderson's Sarah's Scribbles. It's a great game. I'll say that because I worked on it. But the comic has a pretty wide appeal, but it's primarily focused on women ages 24 to 30. That's the main demographic of the comic. We didn't release that game at retail because it had a more narrow demographic, but we took it to Mattel Creations, which is sort of Mattel's direct-to-consumer platform, where Mattel can do crowdfunding or just direct-to-consumer sales. And the reason is because that was a much more specialized product. When you look at Hasbro is a great example. They have HasLab and Hasbro Pulse, which is their sort of crowdfunding thing. And they will release a toy there that costs $300 and is for adult collectors, like Jabba's Bard from Star Wars. Because that toy, sure, there might be an audience for it, but that audience isn't going to be at Walmart looking at on the shelves there. The stuff you're going to sell on the shelves in retail needs to have the widest possible appeal because it's for the mass market. You have to go direct to consumer when you have the much more specialized niche products.
Yeah, and I'd say with the direct to consumer, it makes possible to do what Eddie and I are trying to do. So we don't have the big budget of the big companies. There's a lot of competition for shelf space. I mean, some companies have digital walls where all it is about planning out shelf space. And especially with Toys R Us gone and maybe coming back, that's even more hyper competitive now. So if you're going to start a toy company, kind of the first place you look is direct to consumer. And I think another thing that does, at least in Eddie and I's case, is we're able to establish a relationship with like the community there and really get to know what they're talking about, what their needs and wants are. And then you can kind of design towards that community and have a niche focus on a marketplace, really, and then service that marketplace. And I think direct to consumer allows you to have this kind of special communication between you and your collector or consumer.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It seems to be the topic of the week. It seems like I've been having a lot of conversations about the difference between physical retail and online retail, for the lack of a better word, right? Because these days there's online retail, there's a ton of stuff that's crowdfunded these days. So it's really the opportunity for making things and creating things and getting your projects to the audience has grown exponentially, right? Because there used to be a time when, oh, if I didn't get it into Toys R Us, oh, I'm screwed, whatever. But now there's so many other ways to get your ideas across and to the market. So that's really exciting. But ultimately, the way you deliver that has changed significantly as well, right? Because there used to be a time when it was, we used to present toys the way, the old school way, which is like, here's the toy, here's how it works. You would actually sell that to a buyer and whatnot, and stuff like that. These days, it's all done online. So we were just talking about, why not just do a really cool digital presentation and sell it that way? That way, it always works. It's beautiful. It's perfect. So there's many ways to bring your ideas to life, to market. So I think this is just, I think we're just really starting. What's really interesting to me is how it affects retail, right? Because in terms of what they buy, how they buy it, and then what's available online, it's really cool that you can get the sail barge. I kind of wanted one, but that's that conversation. But yeah, so it's a really interesting time, and I think it's going to evolve even more in the next years.
Kind of on the subject, but sparked a neat idea. If anyone is interested in package design or graphic design, the growth of online shopping has really changed what happens in package design, and then also the type of assets you put online. Because most people are shopping online these days. If you are on Amazon and you're interested in something, you see they have one low-res, grainy-ass photo of their product. You're not really inclined to click buy on that. You're going to go to another page that has tons of images from all the angles, beautiful photography, videos, a filled-out page, right? So in the past, when it was all retail, the emphasis was on having a cool box that can stand out on shelf, bright colors, a window, you can see the toy, there's a try me button. Now, not many people are going and putting their fingers in the little hole in the and to see the thing bark.
Mitsubishi.
Yeah, right now, now you're there's a big push on having these great online assets of videos and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's funny because speaking of all digital, at other toy companies that I work with, even if a lot of online images, like even package images and product images, they're all 100% digital. You know why? Because they're beautiful, they're fast to do, I can change colors. Whereas if you take an actual product, sometimes it doesn't come out as good. You got to touch it up anyways.
There's an issue to that though. A lot of the community, at least in the collector age, I guess, when they do see renders, they know that sometimes the product themselves aren't capable of doing certain things, so they're inclined to be more hesitant actually sometimes till they see actual products. So I mean that's
I agree.
something
I agree.
we
I
don't
think
see.
I think that's why there's a balance. I think, let's be honest, right? When you're dealing with adult collectors, it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, right.
So having the real thing there is also obviously very important.
Absolutely.
But when you're dealing with a younger audience and moms and dads, the pretty picture.
I guess that's when you gotta know your target demographic versus retail versus direct. If you're selling to the parents, if you're selling to wholesale big buyers or direct to consumers, you really gotta know that target demographic and whatever trends are happening and whatever they're going for. Really.
Excellent. Thank you guys. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about mentoring. What advice do you have for seeking feedback in the industry?
You guys are teaching.
Advice for seeking feedback in the industry?
As a young designer or a student, reaching out for mentors, and how do you call up a toy designer and say, "We can look at this"?
Yeah. As a student, your first greatest resource is your professor, because they've been working in the industry for a while, and they have firsthand knowledge. And beyond that, if you can land an internship, of course, that's a great leg up, because then you're there in the business and you can ask anyone. They're all sitting right next to you. Short of that, I think it's a lot of just doing your research online and finding credible sources and even reading books that designers have published. That's where I would go.
Yeah, I would say portfolio. Always be upgrading that and getting feedback on your portfolio. Don't be afraid to take what people are saying and put it into your work. I mean, I think as designers and artists, a lot of times you can be like kind of off-put or offended by what somebody's trying to teach you. I had a teacher at Otis. We had to take a doll design class, and all I wanted to do at Otis was take action figure class. I was just waiting to take action figures. And I was so excited because we got action figure class, but at the same time we had doll class. And I knew both were it's kind of the same thing, and both were gonna take up my time. I'm like, I don't wanna do doll class. But it ended up being my favorite class, and I learned more out of that class than probably any other class I took at Otis, because the teacher there would come around and critique my illustrations. I was like, who are you? Your drawing isn't even as good as that. I thought at the time or whatever, but it turns out that it's much deeper what they can offer you, just aside from kind of what you see as their drawings and their art. There's so much they can offer with composition, and you're trying to do cutesy sometimes. You need to know that the eyes need to be pushed a little closer together for cutesiness. I mean, there's just so much you can get out of a professor who is actually tough and critiques your portfolio correctly. So take constructive criticism well.
Yeah, a couple of things on that. I hear two questions, which is number one, mentoring, right? I think, sure, your teacher, your professor, definitely reach out to those guys. I would say that there is probably not enough mentorship in the industry, to be honest with you guys. Guys like us with just years and years of experience, we owe it to you guys to a certain degree to kind of pass it on and stuff like that. So, I definitely, let's be honest, that's one of the reasons why I'm here, because I really want to pass on, what I've learned to you guys, right or wrong, good or bad, all that other kind of stuff. These days, I think online with Instagram and all that other kind of stuff, and even there's so many guys that you can research and reach out to. Some will answer back, some won't. But there's so much more than when I went to school. Back then, it was like you talk to your upperclassmen, or you talk to your professor, or if you're lucky, you get in an internship, and that was it. Now you can do everything and then more. And then the other side of that is being able to. There's a difference between being an artist, and there's a difference between being a designer. Right? When you're creating art, it's art. It's just beautiful. It's you. It is what it is. It's not subject to being criticized. It's just me. It's just my reflection. But when you're a designer, it's the polar opposite. Now, it uses a lot of the same skill set, right? Drawing, painting. But a design is never perfect until it hits the store. Because it always evolves. It always changes. And your vision is not always the end vision, because you've got to be able to take feedback, good or bad, right or wrong, your good feedback, and you can't let your passion and your ego get in the way of good design, right? I see a lot of young designers do that, which is like, how dare you criticize my work? It's like, dude, it's like, it's just, this won't work, trust me. So there's a lot of that. So, I always say, fail forward. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to ask a lot of questions. Never, ever, ever take criticism too serious. When I went to Art Center, it never fails. There's always one or two guys in there that are crying at the end of class because they got a bad crit. And trust me, I had a ton of bad crits. That just comes with it. Over time, it's really funny because after I graduated and been in the industry now for so long, man, that was the best advice I got. Because it made me smarter. It made me be, it's true. What doesn't kill you does make you stronger. It makes you think more. It makes you work harder. So don't be afraid to being able to take bad criticism and never ever take it personal. I think that's the number one key.
When someone says good job, you didn't learn anything from that. But when someone says this was wrong, do this instead, you just learn something, even if it hurts.
So true.
Churchill said, "Success is the ability to move from one failure to another without a loss of enthusiasm," and I think that's very true.
Great. Eddie, what is your perspective on getting mentorship in the industry?
Okay, yeah, as far as feedback, like these guys touched on it, don't take it personal. You're gonna get feedback that you don't agree with. Especially nowadays in this day and age, and with the internet, I mean, people are going to be direct. You can be direct, seeking mentorship as well. Reach out to people. I mean, a lot of the time they're willing to help. Like he said, sometimes you want to help, but don't be offended when somebody criticizes your work or says something about it. And then you, as a designer, have to know what to pick and choose to implement to then better your design. You can't take it all to heart. You can't implement it all, completely change your design, but take what you feel is going to better your design for the consumer or for that person, and then apply that to it.
Awesome, thank you, gentlemen. Now we're getting to the point where we're going to talk about some toy stories.
Oh, okay.
So hopefully some ones that maybe we haven't heard, but maybe some that we didn't know we knew about. So, the forgotten toys. What are some toys or games that never made it to market that should have? Is there any favorite ones that you can share with us?
I mean, the one thing I would say about that, not having maybe as many years in the industry as these guys, is what I hate to see is when you're in a design company and you design this amazing thing with all this magic and there's electronics and there's all these moving parts, and then you get into a meeting where you realize that that product is $162 and it needs to be $149.99, and you begin the process of gutting it of any of the magic that it had, and you just sit there in awe of the fact that you would move this price point down $12 on a $160 product when you know some grandparent is not going to care about the $12 if they see all the bells and whistles. So to me, it's about the little things that are lost in the process that when you look at in the design, building, you're just like, oh man, if I had that as a kid, I would sleep with it and take it to church with me and stuff, and then just along the line, petroleum prices change, wood production prices change, and things get tossed out. I can't really think of anything that, there's some Thomas stuff I worked on that I spent 6 months getting it into a price range and getting it to what they wanted with all the stuff in there. And then the team changes, it goes to another team, and it doesn't get made. And it's just gone. And you spent 8 months on it. And, hopefully one of the 6 things you were working on makes it through that Planko game of things that get out there.
What do you got?
I had I think what you're asking is what was something I worked on, a toy I worked on that I was really passionate about, and never made it to market, and I wish it did.
Yes.
I worked on a game for Halo Mega Bloks. Mega Bloks is the rival to Legos. Yeah, Legos. And they have this huge line of Halo themed toys, Halo the video games. And I for a while worked on this really awesome tabletop battle game where you have all your Lego or your Halo figures, all your Halo Mega Bloks figures, battling it out with a very simple dice rolling thing. It was a war game. You can measure distances with the Mega Bloks stick, and I had poured so many hours into this. I was online researching damage per second from all the different weapons in the Halo series because I wanted every single Halo toy to have a stat. So if all you had was, I got this pack of Spartans and this one Banshee, well, guess what? There are rules for that in the game, and you can play the game with that. And I went spreadsheets and deep rules, but I also know that was for the hobby sales. But I also knew this had to work at mass, so I had a very thinned down, broadly appealing version of the rules to ease you into it. And it was great, and I know the exact moment it died. I know exactly when it died because first of all, the Mega Bloks team was into it. At Mattel, the Mega Bloks and games are separate teams. The Mega Bloks team was into it. The games team was into it. 343 Industries, Microsoft was into it. primarily because the guy at 343 Industries who was in charge of licensing out toys, it was his idea. So, and I was like always bouncing ideas back and forth. So he was into it. So everyone was into it. But then came the time for at a toy show for someone at Mattel to explain to the retailer what this game is. So you have someone from Target, for instance, going like walking on the line with a sales guy at Mattel saying, "This is our new Uno. This card makes you draw 2 cards, and this is our like chopping dog game or whatever. The dog jumps, and the retailer's like, yeah, great, great. And this is the Halo battle game. To tell you the truth, I really don't understand that much about it, and that right there is exactly when it failed because it couldn't convey all the passion. I wasn't there, but it shouldn't be me. It's no one's fault except for the person who said who was there.
Who took that job? Yeah.
Yeah, no, but in reality, what I joked that it was that salesperson's fault. It wasn't. Well, the problem was the retailer, the Target buyer, or the buyer at Target or whatever, or Walmart or whoever it was. They're looking at it objectively. They're saying, okay, I know a new Uno thing is going to sell on this 1 foot of shelf space. Halo, isn't that video game I think I heard about? Yeah, this is kind of, I can pass on this one. So the license wasn't strong enough, no matter how big Microsoft thinks like Halo is the next Star Wars, to a retailer who's just stocking shelf and they need that thing to move X amount of dollars per foot of shelf. They just say, that's we're going to pass on that. And so it's gone.
Yeah, 2 things on Halo. I worked on the Halo pitch when I was at Mattel. It was a fantastic pitch. We did action figures, we did role play, we did battle rifles, we did full-size helmets, comm systems, games, RC, the whole thing. Coolest pitch I've ever done.
RC board. That's
It was
awesome.
an RC, it was a quarter scale by the
That's
way.
awesome.
Fully RC, quarter scale is about this big.
Wow.
Fits 12-inch figures in there, the whole shebang. Long story short, we didn't get it. My message to you guys is, toys and products will come and go, always. They're always going to have stuff that makes it, and there are always stuff that's never going to make it. That's okay. What's important is that you put in 100% of these projects every single time. It doesn't. You can't go like, oh, this might not make it. I'm just going to suck at it. It doesn't work that way, right? You got to put in 100%, and what you'll find is the more of these you do, and I've done a ton of them, the better you get. You'll be surprised because one of these days you're going to wake up and go, wow, how did I get so much better? It's because you keep working on it, and you take the successes and the failures at the same time, and you're learning from it. So don't ever go into a product that you're working on like, oh, this might not make it. Oh, it doesn't work that way. Please don't do that because, you got to put in 100%. And if it makes it awesome, it's a great portfolio. And if it doesn't, that's okay too, because it's still in your portfolio and you learn something from it. So that's my message to you guys.
Process.
Yeah, it's a journey. It's a journey. I mean, the more stuff it's gonna happen. I've done so many things where if you want to get specific, Cyberforce, Rich Comics, Cyberforce. We did the first collector line on some of that stuff. They were really cool. And I did these really cool vehicles. They opened, they transformed, everything. Mark Silvestri loved it at the time. We had it all tooled. For one reason or another, it died. I remember I was so pissed off. I was way younger then. I was so mad because I had put everything into it. Because back then, and I'm sure some of these guys still do it, I did my own drawings, and we painted our own prototypes. We made our own breadboards. A lot of stuff that you guys are doing now. So I was all in, and when they killed it, I go, oh. But over time, like I said, but don't let that get you down. Over time, you'll learn and you'll mature over it. Right.
I don't have much to say on the topic, but yeah, I mean, you have to stay dedicated to the project because in my short term, I've realized that projects are going to get cut, and it's going to be from one meeting to another, and they're just going to be like, nah, we're like that's it, and you've dedicated months and hours and endless nights to this project, this idea, and just like that, it's over. So it's
You find yourself getting a
It's
thick skin to it, or do
you
you
kind of
just
have
learn
to.
from
You have to because it's gonna happen multiple times.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to develop that thick skin. But like you have to be passionate about it. You can't just be like, man, I'm not really feeling the idea. I guess maybe that's why we're a little different. Why we went into business for ourselves, because then you pursue your own passions and your ideas. But in the industry, you're gonna have to design what the team is developing. You're gonna have to go with the flow.
And even with us, we're taking feedback from
Yeah,
the
yeah.
community. You know, everybody who's kind of come on board with what we're doing, we're constantly listening to them. And I would say any creative endeavor, if you think about the drawings you did when you were 12, and all the drawings in between that and where you are now, they're probably all garbage. But they led to you being able to execute what you do now, you know? So it's process. It's process. The process is what makes you better. So you can draw it, throw it in the garbage, and just realize that what you got out of it was the evolution that gets you better from just going through the process.
Do you feel like that lost game could get you through another game process quicker?
But yeah, you learn things. The putting in 100% effort into every project feels like I'm not getting. And it being killed feels like I wasted all that time. That's nothing good came about it, and you're just sad. But that's it, what you didn't. What you're not thinking about is all the growing you did on that project.
And by the way, you never think about that when you're going through it.
No.
It sucks every time, by the way. I guarantee it sucks every time. Over time, you will see that. Oh, not bad.
So now we're going to talk about misfit toys. This does not necessarily have to be one you actually designed, but something you experienced or were around for toys that maybe should not have gone to market, that you would, yeah, maybe a little controversial. Anything you
I mean, for me, the gimmicky stuff is always kind of like, oh, this didn't have to be made, and I still spent my money on it. So that's kind of like, you know. So I remember, like, as a kid, they were showing commercials of this character where you could like rip its arms off and rip its legs off, and then stick them back on, and it was supposed to be like it was brand new out of the package. I'm like, oh man, that's so cool! I want to try that. And you rip the arm off. It never goes back on. It does not do what it says it's going to do. So, you know, the gimmicky stuff,
Bait switch.
yeah, it's exactly what it is. It's a gimmick and it's meant for that quick purchase and then it's gone. So that's, I guess, you know, in a general
don't have the
sense.
fulfillment. Or
Yeah, it's just put out there to make a quick buck and yeah. And then there's stuff like you can watch, anybody can go on YouTube and watch like toys that shouldn't be made, and there's some really like at
No.
Mattel, there is such a filter for everything
No.
you do. You gotta wonder, like, are you kidding me? Like that looks like his private part or something. How did that get out there? So yeah, scratch your head.
It does.
It does.
It does.
Like lawn charts.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
How
yeah.
did something like that get made where now obviously there's entire segments of legal practice against
Yeah.
for
It's all fun and games until somebody gets a dart in the head.
Right.
Yeah, I think we live in different times, and I think nowadays people are way more sensitive to, and there are many other ways to play. Back then it was pretty straightforward, and people didn't know, whether it's very subjective in terms of what kids used to just go out and play, just go out and do your thing, don't worry about it. And then when you get hurt, it's like you get hurt. These days we're so protective. There's so many regulations. There's so many specs that you have to follow. I think it's just different. But I don't know if there's. I think most toys that make it to the market had good intentions, whether it had or not. It was somebody's good idea at the time, and they made it.
Just depends on the times, I guess, because when I was younger, we ran around with cat guns and you were shooting at each other, and but nowadays, people end up losing their lives for having toy weapons. But it's the different times. But there's various toys that, like Kelly said, you can look up online and there's memes or whatnot that things that shouldn't have been made. But I personally never worked on anything.
So how about like the old junior chemistry sets that would have like small amounts of radioactive
Yeah.
material?
I saw that.
I was like, what? That's cool. Yeah. He was such a bright kid 6 months ago. I don't know what happened.
But this isn't a fun or flashy story, but mistakes still happen in the toy industry about things going in the market that shouldn't. This is one I worked on. It was a magic 8-ball. You know, the shake it and you look and you see the answer. But there was a line of these 2 comic themed magic 8-balls. One was Batman and one was Iron Man. And it was just Batman's head. And then if you look in his neck hole, there's a thing right there. and same with Iron Man. There were 2, Batman and Iron Man. If you know anything about comics, Batman is DC Comics and Iron Man is Marvel Comics. And they're bitter rivals. But you have to have a legal line about who controls the IP on it and molded into every toy. So it's a little, you'll see it, copyright, Marvel or whatever. In this toy, there was a legal line, and it said the Batman on the bag said like Circle C, DC 2000 whatever, right, for DC Comics, and that legal line is also on the Iron Man toy, and so it's a small thing, but if you buy the Iron Man Magic 8-ball, it says DC Comics owns the rights to Iron Man.
Wow.
And that thing went through all approvals. Approvals, by the way, is what you make the product, and then everyone has to look at it. The legal department, the copywriters, the package designers, the toy designers. Everyone looks and makes sure everything is right. The licensor, we send it to DC, we sent one to Marvel, and they all looked at it looks good, it's great. No one looked at the legal line.
Well, that's a whole different, to me, that's a whole different category of honest mistakes in toys, right? And for various reasons, there's a whole community with just Hot Wheels guys. There are collectors out there that just find defects, and they're extremely valuable. They're extremely rare. I remember back in the office, we'd go like, "Yeah, just put them on the side. Don't worry about it." And these guys would go nuts if they had these, right? But they're genuine, honest manufacturing mistakes that somehow make it to market, right? Some are funny, some are not so funny. The licensors, some can be you get into very subjective categories in terms of what's phallic, what's not phallic, being sensitive, not too sensitive. But these things get out there sometimes, and it's nobody's fault really. But everybody, it just goes through the process like we were talking about, and people just miss it. We're all human beings, and it misses, and it gets out there.
I think we even see that in classrooms where there's whole specifications of what a project should be, and everybody looks through it, and then all of a sudden you're like, wow, nobody saw
It
that.
happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, it happens. Yeah, we're human beings.
You're so close to it for such a long time, you don't see that peripheral stuff sometimes.
Can you share a little known fact about the industry? Maybe some of us that are not directly in the toy industry would know.
Be more specific.
Maybe something as far as maybe an obvious one is that DC and Marvel have to license toys. Is there something that is maybe a little bit more of an insider secret to toys?
Second, it's kind of interesting way to sell it. And this is at Mattel, and this is a symptom of Mattel being a giant corporation. But there is a department at Mattel called Standards and Practices, and they are the enemy of fun. Their job is to make sure that when something is released, no one's going to sue, no one's going to get up in arms about the content. And so how that affects the games team is when a while back, Cards Against Humanity came out and it changed the adult party game space. All of a sudden, vulgar was cool, acceptable, yeah, being shocking. And then it got really successful, and then all the other every design I feel like imagine like this, when someone is successful, everyone wants to copy and get a hit of that high. And so at Mattel, we want to do an adult party game that has like edgy content. It's some
R-rated.
yeah, R-rated. The thing is, what the person on the streets who plays Cards Against Humanity thinks is cool and exceptional, a suit in a tower at Mattel is like we could never publish that. And so what you end up with is the copywriter who's on board is going to write all this content, all this really make you blush kind of content, not safe for work stuff, and they have to email it to the standards and practice person, and that person just gets a red marker, just no, and you get back this content. It's like, yeah, it's just like stuff that, like not even grandma jokes. It's like the most juvenile, like poo poo the bed. Like now we don't even have a game because the whole point of the game was to be whatever, and then we just dropped it.
It's funny because I'll piggyback off of that. I don't know if it's an inside POV or whatever, but when you do work for a bigger company, even a smaller company, it's very common that when we have a concept, whether it's at 2D stage, 3D stage, prototype stage, it's very common that we actually test it with a small group of consumers, right? Whether it's mom or kids, we call it, a play session, right? Where we'll actually play it. And then you have these highly trained child psychologists monitoring. They take data, they take facts, they have all these numbers, how many times did they like this, which they like, it gets very scientific. What I find is the more scientific it gets, the more basic it gets, which is, to me, as a designer, a consumer testing and the results, you take it with a grain of salt. It's just insights. It should not, and it should never allow it for a designer to kill a toy or a reason not to move forward. Now, that said, it's good to get these insights, and it's great for me to say, as a designer, to say, oh, so-and-so couldn't pick this up. I've done a couple of these before. Oh, it's too heavy. A 3-year-old couldn't pick it up. This was hard to open. That kind of stuff is invaluable, right? But when you get into the really technical stuff and go like, oh, they don't like the play pattern, it's like, no. Just because they didn't open it, it was because of the dexterity. And I can redesign that, I can rework it. That doesn't mean they don't like the toy. You know what I mean? So I think there's that part of it as a designer, at least I'm very sensitive to, in the sense that, like, don't let these kind of testing dictate what's right or wrong. Or take it as a grain of salt, take it as just informational, and that let us as designers kind of tweak it and work it and stuff like that.
Excellent.
I would say the thing that surprised me the most going into toy was kind of like there's a very Cold War mentality between the toy companies. And I was just kind of shocked when I worked for one of the bigger companies and just realized the contract I was signing, basically they owned everything I did creatively. So if I went home and created a character and I wanted to put it in something later, it could be a problem later that I created it while I was at this company. I was in a death metal band at the time that I had been in for 10 years. And, well, at first it was called Bubonic Birth. That's the really gruesome one. But then we got a little more artsy, and it was Croatoan after the disappeared colony. But the thing was, I had to sign a thing that said that they knew that I was in a band and that it was okay that I could write songs for the band, and that I knew that they didn't own the songs that I created with my band. Like, it was a back and forth because I was in a band when I signed the contract. It was like, no, we own everything, but you've already got this, and it's not really anything we do, so we'll let you still create for that. And then you do all these NDAs and non-disclosures, which is you need to do because you don't want other companies to have your ideas. But I was inside the company working on a very big franchise. I was just going to do small design stuff. But I signed this contract where the first 2 pages were just like telling you every bad thing that was going to happen to you legally if you said anything. And then the last 3 pages of it were, are you sure you read the first 2 pages? I swear to God. It's like, it scares you, you know? You're like, yeah.
Yeah, that's piggybacking off of that. Yes, it's true that at a large toy company, you do sign something before you start working that says you can't any ideas you come up with on or off the job that they technically own. I don't know how they know what's in your head, but they do. But then even within the company, there will be projects that are so secret that other people in the company don't know
Exactly.
what you're working on. And that was the second thing. You might be working on a top secret new toy line for a famous brand, and it's so top secret that you have to be like legally read in to even talk about it or see it. Like I've definitely been a part of approval meetings where we've gone through all the new toys we're going to do for the line, and then they're like, okay, the next one is Project Bananas. If you haven't been read into Project Bananas, you need to leave the room. And my coworker's like, sorry, and I'm sitting here leaving, and then he has to work on the secret Project Bananas. I'm like,
Wow.
And I would say on the opposite end of that is a small upcoming company that is doing everything ourselves. We find that we have to really do the opposite and be as transparent as possible with the consumers that we're working with, because we have no reputation to base off of, and everybody wants to know more about you before they trust you enough to buy into whatever it is you're designing. So, you know, on the opposite end of that, for small companies, I think it pays to be a little more transparent. But yeah, that shocked me. I was just like, what? They own everything?
Well,
I didn't
would
want to
say-
draw anymore.
Fair. I would say though that big companies, even the big boys, are starting to relax that culture a little bit, right? Because they understand that ultimately you can't cap creativity. Yes, everything that you worked on within the company belongs to the company, but I will say that a lot of larger companies are getting to understand that creatives work best when they can work on their own stuff, on their own time, and it's their creation and all that other kind of stuff. So I think a lot of larger companies and a lot of the creative officers are starting to understand that mentality as well.
Right.
We're trying to base our company around like the Image Comics publishing model, where there's an element of creator ownership and ownership of the IP. For me, it's more important to get the good ideas to the table, and then maybe as a toy company you can license it out from the independent person that created it or whatever, trying to develop a new model. Because, I mean, to be perfectly honest, when I got to Mattel, I was just like, okay, it's all new ideas from here. I'm not going to share anything that I've come up with through school or stuff I think about. I'm just starting from scratch, and I'll give them whatever I think of at the time. But yeah, it's definitely kind of stifling creatively. It's like science, With science, you got to share information back and forth, and with creativity, you have to be allowed to think and dream and blue sky stuff. And if you're at home and you're thinking about something cool, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, they're going to own it if I draw anything down. It can be stifling.
And then adding to what Nick said earlier, secret rooms in toy companies does exist. I remember working on, at the time, it was a Star Wars pitch. We were tasked to take Star Wars away from Hasbro at the time. Right? Hasbro, by the way, they ended up getting the license. Anyway, and we gave it, we threw everything but the kitchen sink at this pitch. Everything. We had a secret room. Everything had to be locked up. You had to be on that team, the pitch team, just to get in there. It never works because there's always, especially in a big company, you always go like, hey, show me the secret room.
yeah.
But that kind of stuff does exist. And it is very fun to work on a top secret project.
Any insights that you've
Insights.
seen?
I mean, I've been. I don't know any real secrets. I mean, I've freelanced for Spin Master, and I've helped set up like you say secret rooms. But we set up for like LA Trade Fair, LA Toy Show before, but being there and being able to see the setups, and like we were in this one room, it looks like the Bat Cave, or there was another room where it looked like the monster trucks coming out of the wall. I mean, just being able to see the actual rooms the buyers go into. It's like the showrooms, they call them the Spin Master showrooms. I mean, it's
That's the
a
thing.
sight to see.
You see things you will never see anywhere else. I remember one of my first days at Mattel, I'm driving into the parking lot, and there's Bigfoot, the car, like the Bigfoot. And I'm like, I snapped a picture of that. I'm like, just another day at Mattel, It's bonkers what you see. And there's like Barbie elevators, and it's built for creative people.
Awesome. All right, so we are going to ask some some personal questions. What is a profession each of you would like to try?
Like to try.
I got one. I always wanted to design playground equipment, like the slides, the monkey bars, like all that stuff. I have books on it. That's something I was studying before I decided to go into toy design. Because to me, my main thing is I just like making things that people can use. Game design is a great way to do that because I can draw the board and make the pod and have you roll a die, and then you're actually using the thing. And that feels great. But ever since I was a kid, I've always loved playgrounds, and I've always wanted to design them.
Still can.
I still can. I can still go into that.
I like it. But I mean, other than, I would stick with like something design-wise. Prior to the toy industry, I may not look it. I'm actually 37, so anything in the art field, I did restaurants and culinary arts. I did that for like 12 years. So anything in the arts would be something, but maybe like architecture, designing buildings, something else would be kind of cool.
So as I mentioned, I was in a death metal band, local death metal band in LA, and it's funny because I got kind of recruited into it, my cousin's band, and when you're in a band and you want to play metal, you get harder and harder. Oh, it's Metallica, and oh, we got to be harder than them. We got to be more gruesome than them. And the next thing you know, it's so extreme that you're just in the studio laughing your head off at bonkers ideas that you're coming up with and gruesome things you're doing to human bodies and stuff. So it's a fun thing. And so I always loved that, the idea of getting to play music live and be in front of on the stage and execute music. And death metal is a very technical kind of music to play, and I like that aspect of it. But having done it, and it's like, okay, so where does this go at the end of the day if we're successful? I'm in a van with 4 sweaty dudes who haven't showered in a month, and we're all hungover, going to the next stupid thing we're gonna do. I'm like, toy seems a little healthier.
That's a toy line right there.
Yeah, actually, I
Four
designed a
sweaty
toy
dudes
line
with
like
girls.
that in
There you
Doll's
go.
class. I had these
There you
death
go.
metal chicks. It
There
was
you go.
awesome.
Death metal chicks. There you go. Right there.
But yeah, I mean, other than that, I've always loved comic books and illustration. I'm working on a comic book right now for our company, so partnered with another. Yeah.
No, comic books are cool. Always cool.
Yep.
It's funny because I talked a little bit about this earlier, which is the notion of being an artist and a designer, right? And the two, to me, are very different. I've always wanted to try being like a starving artist, where you just lock yourself in a studio and you're just going crazy and you're just going nuts. Because as a designer, I'm so used to being not criticized, but having people to comment on your work and being able to fine tune your work. I mean, it's what we do, right?
So technical as well.
It's very technical, but it's also the process, and it's very strategic, and to a certain degree, it's very clinical, right? You do this, you do this, you do this, you prototype, I've always wanted to just, and maybe I still will, just
As long as Mattel doesn't.
just be not anymore, not for me. I've always wanted to just really be expressive and put on an art show, and it's just me, and and it just release all that side of the creativity of me. Because to me, designer and industrial designers is very left brain, right brain, right? There's kind of the creative side, and there's also the technical side. And for us designers and industrial designers and toy designers and industrial designers, to me, it's how you balance those sides. I've always wanted to just take the technical side of it and just go nuts.
Just have the fun with it.
Well, smoke a couple.
It's legal.
It's legal here now.
It's legal.
Anyway.
Inspiration.
We're artists.
Oh, we already got you. Okay, yes. What profession would you least like to try? We'll start back.
Oh, marketing. That's easy.
Okay. Wow.
Didn't even have to think about it.
No, because I think it's and I say that with respect because it's really hard. Coming up with a good idea is easy to me because I'm a creative. That's what I do. I always come up with good ideas. That's why I love being in brainstorms. I love being challenged with ideas. I love people coming up to me and go like, how do I make it better? How do I tweak this? How do I change this? I love that, right? But to take a product and tell somebody and make it great and tell how good it is, like, you know, like Nick was saying earlier, like, you're only as good as how you sell this to the retailer, right? And to be able to have a marketing strategy and a marketing plan that works successfully over and over and over again, it's really hard, at least for me, because I'm more of a creative. That part of my DNA doesn't work that well in that respect. So I always go like, man, I'm never going to be, you know, I've been doing this for a while now, so I understand the needs of a marketing person and why and all that other kind of stuff. But to me, like, man, that's a tough gig. That's a tough gig. That's really hard to be in charge of, you know, a multi-million-dollar product line, and you have to market it and see to its successes and all that other kind of stuff. It's really tough.
All right, we'll go in reverse order. What would you least like to do?
Oh man, I've done them all already. When I was younger, gosh, I've done heavy construction before I started my business when I was younger, and been down in 14-foot holes, cutting into live sewer lines and stuff like that. So any of that stuff I would never want to do again. But anything that's kind of repetitive or, you know, not challenging creatively, I think most of us creative people are not the 9-to-5er types. I mean, Mattel is very flexible about when you go and when you leave and stuff like that. And I think that's so helpful because a lot of times you need to be there all day, and sometimes you don't. And it's different every day. There's another challenge every day that you kind of have to jump into action to, you know, resolve. And so anything repetitive or anything with numbers, I don't like math, so that too.
Eddie?
Any profession I wouldn't like to try. I mean, not that I can necessarily think of. Maybe I'm just too new to realize it, but I really wouldn't know how to address
That's right.
it.
You're open to it. You're down for whatever.
I mean, yeah, why not? That's what life's for, right? You
That's a
want to
good attitude.
experience things and,
Right.
and
That's a
you
great
know,
attitude.
you know, learn what you can from what you do. But I mean, there's nothing off the top of my head that I would just be like,
My nightmare profession is being an event organizer.
Technical difficulties? Is that-
No. It's having to be personable, having to talk to people. Hey, I need to call this person to make sure the spoons are there. I have to call this person to or reserve the venue, and like, I don't want to talk to them.
That's fun. All right. So none of you are hopefully very close to that, but when the day comes, how would you like to be remembered?
First of all, as a good dad to my daughter. I guess creatively, we're still writing our story, I think, Eddie and I. So I guess like what I see the vision of what we're trying to do is create an environment for creative people, like I said, to own more of their own ideas. Kind of celebrate just creative ownership. So like I'd like to build a company where it's not necessarily based on how much I pay you to come work for us. It's how much can you get out of it with your own entrepreneurial ideas, and how much can you grow this thing that we started right here that you own and that we license for you to do the toys or something like that. So yeah, I guess somebody who created a creative environment for creative people to play in, right, and monetize their ideas.
It's funny for me. I always try to think of myself as every project that I work on, I give my all. It's 100%. So to me, like, I don't really think back and go like, oh, how did somebody think of myself? Like, I don't really care how people think of me, because I always know I do my best. And sometimes you drive yourself crazy in terms of people's perception of you and what they think of you. I really don't give a shit. As long as, because I can live with myself and say, I did my best with every project, whether it makes it, whether it doesn't make it, that's okay. What matters to me is I give it 110% every single time. To me, that's what makes sense to me, and that's how I look back at myself. I will say though that as I get more senior in this industry, it is cool every once in a while for somebody to go like, I remember one kid, somebody younger, came up to me and said, "You worked on Street Sharks?" Oh shit, that's my favorite toy line. And I go like, oh wow. I go like, those are the kind of things I kind of live for. It's not how people perceive me, myself, so to speak. But it's like I always get a kick out of it and go like, oh, you like something that I designed? That's really cool. You know what I mean? So that's what drives me.
So your work almost stands for you in a sense.
Yeah, I don't think about if people love my work, great. If they don't, that's okay too.
Being recognized for the toys you made is a great feeling, but I think when I'm gone, I just want. I don't care if people are like, oh, he designed great games. They're fun. That'd be nice, but I think more like Kelly said. I just want like my picture to be on the ofrenda at Dia de los Muertos, and then to say like, Dad was always a great cook.
Awesome.
I mean, yeah, like these guys. I mean, I'm a parent myself. I have 3 kids, but other than being remembered, like outside of my family, I don't think that I'd want to. But I want to be remembered at least by my family as somebody who's hardworking, dedicated, passionate, and always willing to help out. Obviously, as I did here, but I don't think I want to be remembered other than him.
I can. It's been press released already. I can't show you anything. It's called Team MechBot's Animal Rescue. It's a CG animated TV show. It's a preschool property. It's going to launch next year, and it's a Peacock property. That's awesome. I created it. I'm the co-creator, and I designed pretty much all the assets.
Wow.
Awesome. Yeah, it was fun. It was fun.
Congratulations.
I always said that was a bucket list. I've always wanted.
It doesn't get better if you're someone who holds on to stress. That's a very personal thing. You're always going to be with school. You have very known deadlines. It's the same, and when you're working at a job, you're going to be like, how can I do all this by the time? There's going to be stress no matter what you do in your life. You have to learn the 3 magic words when you're feeling stressed about a project. It's fuck it, dude. Like I'm gonna do the work or not. It's gonna get done or not. I'm gonna do my best. When the deadline comes, like you can only do as much as you can humanly do, right? The outcome's gonna be the outcome, and just don't hold on to the stress. You're like, hey, I'm doing what I can do.
I mean, my advice to you guys is 2 very important things, in my opinion, which is time management and stress management. Time management is incredibly critical in terms of managing multiple projects, multiple classes, making sure you get things done. Stress management is a real thing, even for guys like us. I'm straight up, I get stressed out all the time with deadlines and stuff like that. It's a real thing. So don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to go, I guarantee you, you're not alone. We deal with it as industry professionals every day, especially when it comes to like big presentations and big meetings and stuff like that. It's not about whether you deal with stress or not, it's how you deal with stress. Because you will deal with stress, right? So it's just a matter of, and there's, when my first day at Art Center, we literally started off with a stress management class, in terms of deep breathing, how to think, how to manifest yourself in terms of stressful situations and stuff like that. So there are many other avenues that you can reach out to these days in terms of learning, especially with YouTube and all that other kind of stuff, in terms of stress management and stuff like that. But ultimately, you are not alone, and I would definitely reach out to whether it's your instructor or friends and families and really talk it out. And once you do that, you'll find that it ain't that bad. Because I do that to myself all the time. It's like, take a deep breath, everything's cool.
Yeah, I think for me, it's kind of like a tolerance level. You're gonna face stress. We take a lot on ourselves just by entering into creative endeavors. Eddie and I are starting a toy company, which is like an impossible thing to do, basically. And so, and dealing with your consumers even, and people that don't believe that you're going to do this product or whatever, it's a lot of stress all the time. But for me, it comes mostly from inaction and not doing. Because then I'm thinking too much about what I should be doing, and the stress level is building because I'm not doing that thing. So if I'm acting on it, even if it's like I can't sleep, I'll get up and I'll just start working, and it starts to relax me because I feel like I'm back on the track now. And then also, you find that your tolerance level for stress is higher the next time you come into conflict or whatever with a similar thing or even a bigger thing. You're like, I dealt with this fine. I handled that when I didn't know what I was doing. We'll just take this one step at a time and handle it too. And you build a tolerance level for the amount of stress that you kind of take on yourself, I would say.
Yeah, but I think to that point though is, I think it's great to build up a tolerance, but again, don't take it on yourself if you don't have to. Right? Reach out and make sure that you have a relief valve for all that stuff. Don't let it build up too much. Yes, it's true. The more you take, the better you are, the stronger you are. But I think everybody needs that relief valve, right? Whether it's for myself, I do sketch therapy myself. I love to doodle and stuff like that. I found that's incredibly stress relieving. I don't think I just doodle. I hope you guys all have
I like to
classes.
jog, yeah.
People have to jog, but everybody has their own relief valve to relieving that stress. I think that's key. It's when you don't have that, that's when you boil over. And no matter how much of it you can take, at some point it goes over, right? So you never want to get there.
It's important to identify what you're stressed about, and you should really only be stressed about the things you can't control. Don't stress about something that's outside of your control. Like, I hope someone does this thing right for this. Guess what? That's not something you can control. What I can control is I have to do these 12 drawings by 5 in the morning. So let's just do that and not worry about anything else.
That's awesome.
Dealing with stress, you gotta learn how to take the punches. You're gonna be stressed out. I'd be lying to you if I'd say some relationships aren't gonna suffer. It's a lot of work. Dealing and managing the stress is essential, and at the end of the day, you gotta prioritize yourself, take care of yourself, and if something can't get accomplished, just leave it at that. You tried your best, but it's a stressful, very stressful environment.
I think about it all the time. Inclusivity, representation is something you have to actively work towards, because if you don't, people are just going to do what they've always done. I have my big pet peeve with games packaging for kids is on the back of the box or on the front, they're going to show a picture of kids playing the game, right? Because you want to see kids having fun with the toy. For the longest time, thank God now it's changing. For the longest time, you would have a little boy and a little girl and maybe a token little kid of color playing the game, and the little white boy is always the one winning the game, like yay! And then the kid of color and then the girl are kind of like, yeah, good for you. And it was just every single time. And so that's my personal crusade is to like, stop that, don't do that anymore. Show some representation. Everyone needs to see themselves in the toys. And this is just games, but for the doll industry is massive. And everyone, I swear to you, like on my life, everyone at Mattel is hyper conscious of that right now. And they're designing great stuff. Actually, a person I went to school with, Linda Jang, designed a toy line called Creatable World, which was genderless dolls. With so you get it's sort of like creating a character in an RPG. You just have the body type you want, the body shape you want, and whatever clothes, whatever hair. It's not a boy, it's not a girl, it's whatever you want it to be. If you wanted to make it a boy, you could be. If you wanted to be a girl, you could be. All the skin colors, all the hair types. The toys is really going towards it now, because it's the people who are working there designing the toys are people like us. And no offense, the more the older people get phased out and replaced by newer people, the more progressive the toys will get.
I agree with that for the most part. I do feel that there's a thin line. There's like you said, ethical issues. Like there's a thin line between some of the things. I actually did one of my final papers at Otis was on like the hypersexualization of toys, specifically dolls, and some of the dolls that are geared towards younger demographics, are wearing inappropriate attire. I mean, as a father, it kind of concerns me. So it's a thing I addressed in my paper and I looked into. And I mean, there is a thin line, like I said, but I mean, times are changing of what's acceptable and what is not. But I mean, it's always something as a designer that you're conscious of what is going to be accepted, what is not, and what might offend people and what will and what won't. Like, so, I mean, it's something you always have to have in mind.
I mean, I think of it more as like a realism thing. You know, if you're gonna write a story that only features one demographic, it's so homogenized and not realistic that you can't pull a good story out of that. So I think at the bigger companies, it's more of like an ethical issue, but we work with collector stuff, so I think we kind of chose that on purpose to kind of stay away from the ethical issues that have to deal with that. But I would say for me, it's more of a like, how your story's not going to be real, you know, and convincing if you don't have a diverse crowd. You know, it's a melting pot, so why not express that? So I think of it more in lines of story and realism and, you know, creating characters that not necessarily appeal to the marketplace because that changes a lot, but characters that can last and be real 20 years from now. So I guess like I said, I think of it more in lines of story and character.
You know, it is a good question. I from my personal experience, I would say no. I've never seen somebody who was criticized or chastised or fired because their toy line didn't succeed. I mean, there are many reasons why something doesn't succeed, right? And it's 99.99% of the time it's never because of the designer. Does that make sense? And there's 100 other reasons why things fail, things doesn't make it, and all that other kind of stuff. And to me, it ties into that don't take it personal type of question, right? Because I think as long as you do your best, and when you do your best, I could guarantee you your peers will know that. And the people that you work with will know that. It's like, oh, so-and-so, man, he killed it, or she killed it. It's a great job, even though it didn't make it. That's okay, right? Because like I said, you know, that's the reality of being in the toy business. Some things make it, some things don't. And that's
and
okay.
they've all been there too, you know, with you, and been criticized and had that.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying though. It's like, oh, it's because you're a designer. It's like, no, it's not because you're
Another interesting thing to think about is in school, you are solely responsible for everything you produce. In the toy industry or in the design world, when you have coworkers, you have someone sitting next to you on your left and the right, and they're going to help you give feedback and like, hey, did you think of that? And everyone in that room is working on making the best thing possible with you. You might be in charge of the design, and it might be your responsibility to make sure the drawing's on time or what the thing looks like, but everyone is working together, and everyone's giving input to make that thing better. And it's not like in school where it's just me, spend all this time working on this drawing, and then here it is, and the teacher gives you a C or whatever. That was all you, but that scenario doesn't exist when you're working in the profession.
I remember my first 2 months at Mattel. I was like, oh my God, what did I do? Can I get out of this? I would go into, I dreamed of being there. That's the only thing I wanted, and then I was going to go start my own business. But I got there, and I got gifted onto this amazing team, the Thomas and Friend team. It was such great people. But they would give you these projects, and come up with a themed set. And I'm like, okay, and I'm here for 3 weeks, and I'm like, oh, candy, everybody likes candy. I'll do. And you work on it for 2 weeks, and then you get into a room with 40 people, and there's supervisors, there's marketing people, there's all these people, and they're like, yeah, candy has been done. Okay, what else? And you're just like, oh man. And that happened over and over again for my first 2 months. And like I was on the verge of tears. And I mean, I'm 6'2" and I played in a death metal band, and I was gonna cry in this guy's office because I was so uncomfortable with what I was doing. And no, everyone there could not have been sweeter and kinder. Gabe Carlson was my supervisor at the time, and he brought me into his office and just for like an hour said the nicest stuff. He's like, "Look, man, you're new in the toy industry." He's like, "Everybody needs time to kind of get the flow going." He's like, "Just bring us something that you have put yourself into." It's like, "You're not a candy guy, that." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And I felt more comfortable after that when they were like, no, everybody's like that. It takes a little while to get going. But yeah, I wanted to leave. I was like devastated kind of. But after that, my next idea was a total home run, or like my next 3 ideas were a total home run because it kind of broke down the barrier, like artistically for me. What do I do? Which direction I go? Be yourself and give me that. And then at least, you put your heart into it when it gets critiqued and everybody can see that. So yeah, I found everybody to be like super sensitive people like we all are, and
Yeah. I think we're a lot as designers. I think we are our own worst critics sometimes. We're harder on ourselves sometimes, and that's why like the more you do this stuff, I think the more mature you get in terms of how you take your own criticism, and because like when you put in a lot of hard work and it just looks great, and sometimes it doesn't. It's a struggle. Even I go through that even these days. Like sometimes when you're drawing something or you're ready, it doesn't look right. It still doesn't look right. And it's a struggle, right? You work at it and you push it around and move things around, and that's just the way it is. And I think the more you do it, the better you get. But there's never that nirvana moment where it's like, oh, everything is perfect. So just know that.
Right. We're going to answer an online question and then come back to some more in person. What was the biggest or most memorable roadblock that you made, or that made you maybe rethink what you were doing, or maybe I think you touched a little bit on that.
Oh, I have an even better one. When I got let go of Mattel, I was just absolutely devastated. And everybody tells you, "Oh, it just happens. It's part of the industry," but you never expect it to be you. And I was on the roulette team, and me and my manager didn't vibe totally all the time. And as much as I needed to be on that team, roulette's a whole other thing. It's kind of like running your own business inside of Mattel, in that you're talking to the vendors. You don't have Mattel manufacturing or budgets, stuff like that. It's a little small company that does value market stuff, so dollar store, Dollar General. But it was a great fit for me because I wanted to start my own business, and that was the way to learn all the steps. Oh, how does it get from here to here? How do you communicate with the vendor? What happens once it gets here? All that stuff you kind of do, or you're very hands-on with in roulette. But when I got let go, it just like changed everything. Like I was devastated, and I was like, well, it's the only toy company I wanted to be at. What do I do now? So I moved to Georgia for 8 months and started my own company. Then moved back. Yeah. But yeah, that was a crossroads for sure.
Any crossroad moments for either of you guys?
I was trying to think about roadblocks, and all I can think about is things I regret doing in the professional world. And for me, that's always saying something I shouldn't have said, or doing some interpersonal faux pas, and then just dwelling on that every day the rest of my life. Like I wish I didn't say that. Because if you didn't like a drawing, I did okay. Yeah, I could have done better. Or like when your work is criticized, that's different than when you do something that's reflective of you as a person. So you can't really change that.
Right.
That's a really good point. I practice this all the time. Dora the Explorer taught me that, which is think before you say something. And the whole notion of, because as creative, sometimes you just get this creative thing that's just ready to explode, right? And sometimes you say it right, sometimes you don't say it right. The challenge is, as you get better and better, is how to control that, right? So same thing with whether you're putting on a piece of paper or you're in a presentation. Really think about what you're going to say, what you're going to draw, what you're going to design first. You know, because if you don't, like you said, sometimes it just comes out and you go like, oh man, what did I do? You know, it happens. You know, so that's one of the hardest things as a creative to control and to dial in. Because sometimes when you're in the moment, man, you're in the moment, and it's very hard to control that. You know. And sometimes it comes out, and if you fail, that's okay too.
Breakthrough moments, you said. I mean, I guess my mind kind of went a different direction. I mean, being a freelancer, they call me up all the time, and they have me do odd jobs at Spin Master. And you know, sometimes I'm helping sit next to a designer. The next week, I'm drinking a coffee with the VP of preschool design. So it's like the roadblock that I saw was to not try to be intimidated by people's positions. I understand that, you know, they're above you and there's ranks and whatnot, but at the end of the day, they're going to lay their head on the pillow the same way you are. I mean, it's just try not to be intimidated by your senior designers, your bosses. Just, you know, at the end of the day, they're just someone else just like us, I guess.
Awesome.
What works for me is just do something else. Stop trying to, like, you're trying to tap and no water comes out. Turning it more isn't going to make water come out automatically. You have to turn it off and walk away and hope the well fills back up. And just everyone has different reasons, different ways to get reinvigorated. Some people jog, some people take a shower, some people walk their dog, watch TV, play video games, listen to music. The point is just stop trying and then come back to it. I turn off the computer, so we all work on the computer. I turn off the computer and then I go outside and get sunlight. I like to sit in the back of my pickup truck because it's black and the sun it will heat it up. So I just sit out there in some shorts. And I'm from Arizona.
Vitamin D.
Yeah, Arizona originally. I used to just be outdoors all the time, and so being stuck in a room with no light drains me. So I have to go get more sun power.
I'm a little different. I like to push through it. I like the struggle. You know, when I'm drawing something or design something and something doesn't work, I like to just keep working at it because I find that I don't like to give up so easily. I find that it is a struggle sometimes, especially when something doesn't work. And the reason why I say that is the more I push myself, the better I get. And it gets easier. And I don't go through those roadblocks as much anymore. Because, you know, to me, it's a battle sometimes. Because sometimes, even, you know, I just had this the other day. I was drawing something doesn't look right. It still doesn't look right. You know, you still get frustrated, right? But you learn to work through it. And I think the more you take a deep breath and go like, what am I doing wrong? What's wrong with it? And that's where your analytical side to me comes in, right? What am I doing wrong? You got to, you know, it's that stop and think thing, right? What am I doing wrong? And then you keep working at it. You keep working at it. For me, most of the times I push through them. So to me, in that respect, it's like an athlete. You know how they, you know, when they tell you to like push through it, you got to push through that momentum and all that other kind of stuff. I find that it's very true as a creative. You got to push through it. You got to learn how to push through it. You got to learn not to get stressed out. You got to learn to be analytical about it and be very technical about it. And most of the time, I would say it works. If it doesn't, then it's okay to go to Arizona and go to the Southern Sun. That make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I like both of those really, because I find with illustration that's so true. It's just like when you first wake up in the morning, it's like you got to start all over in your head, and it takes a little while to get through the rough patches. But I also agree with Nick too that it's just like almost anything else than what you're doing at the time, you're still going to be thinking about it. But like, I'll go jog at the beach and I'm thinking about it because you can't help yourself at that point. You're just obsessing over whatever it is, and that's part of the problem that, you know, sometimes. And then you'll notice something out of the corner of your eye or the shade of blue in the sky, and all of a sudden there's like, oh, there it is. There's the idea. And it's like it comes to you just by letting your brain relax, or even going to bed and sleeping. Like, problems will work themselves out if you can let go of them for a little bit.
have another online question of what programs or software do you mainly use? That's a great question.
For 3D modeling, a lot of the industry, I guess, is leaning towards like ZBrush for organic shapes and like characters, organics. But for more technical, we use like Rhinoceros 3D is what we were taught at Otis. So ZBrush and Rhino are two like, I think, essential. I guess fundamental part, like it starts with like fundamentals. They're good fundamental tools to know, and the interfaces are quite different, and it's a big learning curve. But those are two programs that are pretty essential.
How about you? What are you using at?
I mainly use Illustrator, Photoshop for anything. If I'm creating a visual,
Yeah.
if I'm not, I'm using paper, scissors, markers for making prototypes.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think hands-on is always very important. You know, everything is digital these days. For myself, I succeed sometimes, sometimes I don't. I try not to use the most conventional, like, you know, Adobe, CS, whatever, Illustrator, Photoshop. I think these days, there's about to be a pendulum swing. There's a lot of, you know, I do most of my work on my iPad these days. And there are a ton of apps. Procreate, there's a program called Shape 3D that I use quite a bit. It's a 3D program. There's a bunch of vector-based app. Infinity Designer is another one of them. These are fantastic apps that are, you know, typically a one-time purchase. I try to learn those because for what I do, I like the idea of learning something different and something new, because I do think a lot of these apps are up and coming, and I think you're going to see more and more of them take the tech side of things and making it completely different. So I really like trying those. To me, because I've used Photoshop and Illustrator and all that other kind of stuff, so I really enjoy trying a lot of these new apps, and they're fantastic.
Yeah, I pretty much live in Photoshop because right now, especially, I'm drawing a comic book, and I draw in Photoshop because it's practical for me right now. It's, you know, it's a timing thing where if I'm drawing the pencil and paper and then ink over that isn't conducive to be able to get done what I need to in a certain amount of time. So I really like Photoshop for illustration. For graphic stuff and like logos, Illustrator obviously, and then I'll bounce between the two doing different things to kind of, you know, blend different elements of those programs when I need something like that. And then, yeah, Rhino I use a lot because I just use it really more for 3D sketching. I don't like, you know, for what we do, you're going to hand off that 3D stuff to somebody overseas that's going to be building the product a lot of the time. Eddie's more of the 3D guy in our business, and we know our lanes kind of. So like I stick to illustration, and Eddie's definitely more of the 3D guy. But for me, Rhino is like a good way to sketch in 3D, if that makes sense. You can prototype with it real quick. You can have something in an hour. I did a lightsaber for the plush Darth Vader at Mattel in like an hour, and I was pitching it on stage in front of 300 people. And it's like, wow, that is cool. And then, you know, somebody else is going to take that though and put it into SolidWorks probably and do something magnificent with it. So I just like to use it to sketch around. He's way more of the ZBrush guy. So I'll draw something in Photoshop and send it to him, and he'll sculpt it in ZBrush on 3D, and that's the way we work. But I used Manga Studios for a while. I don't know if that's even still around, but that was like a cool little comic book thing.
The only good takeaway here is you should use the tool that you're most proficient at to get your idea across.
100%. 100%. Well, there used to be a time when, you know, when you guys, there used to be a time when school, like, they only teach you Photoshop and Illustrator, and that was it. Because those are the industry standards, right? Because I think more and more you're going to find that that's what I was saying earlier on, more and more you're going to see other apps and other companies come up with even more powerful, even more intuitive interfaces, better features and stuff like that. And some of these bigger guys are just struggling to keep up. You know, Procreate is a great example. It's like, you know, before then I was like Photoshop all the time. Now
easier to use Procreate, isn't it? It's kind of like
Well,
cheating
no,
in a way.
well, I mean, that's why I don't really use Photoshop on the big Wacom's anymore, because it's just so bulky and it's tethered, and with my iPad, it's like, man, I'm right here all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. It's so easy.
You find that sometimes the certain companies may have a standard because of licenses they bought into and what have you, but industries really kind of are shifting now to where the output is what's key, not the, yeah, so whatever you as a creative find as your process and can get to the finish line faster and better results.
Imagine if there was an orchestra and you were an amazing guitarist and you get there, like, sorry, but you're gonna have to play this cello. Like, well, I do best on the guitar. Like, well, yeah, but we only have cello, so.
If you don't have that community that you're building, there's no point, really. And I think for us, what it did, okay, so to start with your basic question is like, we just went on Instagram to start and Facebook and linked those two things together as a way to get started. And so then we started following all the guys that we liked. So the community we're dealing with is like high-end 4K toy photography, which I didn't know existed, like Toy School, before we got here, but it's like film quality what they're doing. So all the toys have to be really, really detailed. So we started getting to that, and we started picking our favorite guys and following them.
But before that, the community was already there. Like, you have to find
Yeah.
a niche or a community that you can associate yourself with. I mean, you gotta constantly interact with that community,
Every
posting,
day.
talking, answering direct message. It takes a lot, but being involved with that community is gonna help you build that rapport that you need to be able to pitch your ideas or seem credible, and you opening yourself up and, you know, putting yourself out there for people to be able to look into you and your business and see if it's credible would be a start.
And brand yourself.
Yeah.
So like with me and him, we have we have a variety of logos, but they're all within what we're doing. So we're Odd Frog Entertainment. We have a frog head. We have a frog on our logo. We have a couple different things like that, but they're all the same thing. So whenever we're engaging with that community, they see the frog. They, you know, and you start to build that brand awareness on these platforms. So branding is a big part of it. Like, you know, if you're going to go for something, pick a couple images that are associated with what you're doing and create a nice logo and a nice brand. And, you know, the thing is, like with Facebook, you want a different logo than you want with YouTube, right? They're all different sizes. So create 4 or 5 different things that you can brand your brand with, and that people will start to recognize you from the image alone. And then you're in that community and you're engaging and you're talking, and your brand starts coming up more and more. And it just is naturally going to become aware to the community more and more if you're kind of building your business and letting people know what's going on with what you're doing. And like Eddie said, transparency for us is huge, because like we were supposed to get a $6,000 prototype here yesterday, and it turns out it just left China today. And we had it all set up to go on live with influencers and stuff on Instagram and talk all about it, and we have to tell everybody it's not here yet. So it's all a challenge, but the communication and the openness and really branding yourself and staying focused like a laser beam on what it is that you're doing. But Instagram, Facebook, and then we had an early on controversy in our business where we did some contract work for a entity that probably was a little in over their head as far as the supply chain of what has to happen to get a toy made. So they hired us to come in and do it for them. So we did. And when Eddie and I get in there, we start branding everything and we start promoting everything. It's just what we do for our company, because that's what you have to do. Well, the guy never paid us. Turns out he took a lot of money from the community before we even contracted with him. And we go into it and start branding everything, redesigning his car and saying, we're working with him now, don't worry. Well, he defrauds everybody, never pays us. I have to call the big bad toy store and tell them we're not going to make the product for the guy anymore. And all of a sudden our brand is like stained by this. So things happen. You got to stick with it, you know, persevere. And
Know
You
your
know,
community.
yeah, know the community and just be open with the community about stuff that happens. But brand yourself. You don't even need marketing anymore, honestly, in my opinion. If you've got a good handle on social media and you're okay to engage with you're that kind of person that's very communicative, you're gonna market your stuff. There's just, it's all the tools are there as far as social media and getting awareness out there.
Great answer.
Oh, but you know what I was gonna say about the whole controversy is we ended up just saying, all right, well, let's get ourselves out there and tell the story of what actually happened. And so we started a podcast from that. And that was 4 months ago. And, we've grown our YouTube, followers, I guess? I hate that word, but subscribers for YouTube. So all these avenues, all those little things, pick a couple of good ones and really focus on building awareness of who you are and what you're doing on those platforms.
Know that community and know the trends in that community, so you can kind of try to plan and design for upcoming trend. It's hard, but there's trends in everything, and if you can catch like a whiff of an oncoming trend and jump on that, that definitely helps as well.
Yeah, like trend forecasting.
All right, we have another online question that I think might be relevant very differently for all of you is, how do you guys get paid?
Yeah, it's gonna be different for all of us.
Yeah, so as entrepreneurs, we've been at this for over almost 2 years, and we haven't seen a dime. So that's
We did a
why.
lot of work for free.
Yeah,
and never
you
got
work
paid,
for free
actually.
for a lot for your own business. That's why we freelance. I DoorDash myself. I do whatever I can do, to make. But at the end of the day, I'm trying to make this business work, and that's what I put, I guess, my after hours towards that. But
I'm a suit. I get a salary.
Sure. You're getting into the business side of things. With my gigs, studio pays me. It's through a studio, so I get paid by the studio. On my consultancy work, it's paid by the client. And the terms are usually different in terms of when they pay, how they pay, and stuff like that. But again, we're getting into the business side of things.
For the studio, is it hourly for the studio or by project?
Oh.
Or
Good question. It's per episode, so you're getting paid, and most animation studio works that way. It's per episode, and you're getting paid by the episode. And when episodes are completed, you're getting paid through that. And for consultancy type work, it's per job, per that.
yeah, so I also do freelance. But in freelance work, they pay by hour. You kind of set your own rate, and then they negotiate with you, and then you submit your own receipt, your own invoice, and they pay you direct deposit for freelance work.
Yeah, I was just going to say that exact same thing. But being an entrepreneur, it's like you realize that you're building something for the future. So you do a lot of just work for the future. You're sitting there going, someday this is going to work. So like Eddie said, we do everything. We hustle every day, basically. Today I painted a house. So, you just use whatever skill you got to put yourself out there, because at the end of the day, you are trying to do something kind of impossible. But if you stick with it and you learn as you go, we've learned so much about supply chain, and it's amazing what you can learn by just putting yourself out there and just doing it. So yeah, getting paid. I would say this: the challenge is to take your idea and figure out how to generate income on it. And that's the main thing of any business. So first of all, you got to have a good enough idea that you think people will be interested in it. And then you have to go through all the steps to make it available to start to generate income. So while we're not doing that right now, we're building towards that in the future. And we have a plan for what to do when we do start generating that income.
Honestly, that's a whole different lecture, which is the whole business side of design.
It's a whole degree.
How to invoice, how to engage clients, how to stay social, and all that other. That's a whole separate creature.
we'll have you back for
Management side.
management.
Well, management is another thing.
Yes.
It's interesting.
I mean, that's kind of what our situation ended up being as entrepreneurs and business owners. We got involved with a project that seemed to be a great idea, but we were like, in a way, we were like a third party. So once that fell through and we decided to go with our idea, we kind of cut the middleman out, and we were able to see like the possibilities of more profit gains and stuff like that. So, I mean,
This hasn't happened to me. Steve, have you ever seen someone get pulled off a group and move to a special project, and then that project get canceled, and then they just let go of everyone on that team?
Not quite to that degree. I think people get pulled to different projects all the time, but I've never seen, very seldom have I seen, maybe once or twice, where like literally like an entire team gets dissolved. That's very seldom. But to answer your first question is, yes, it does happen. I have worked on a project. It was a crash and burn. We had to deliver something to Toys R Us in a couple of months, and we designed it. We took it to manufacturing. We got it to Toys R Us, and I don't think it lasted. And it was a mediocre toy line at best. I'm not going to name the exact name of it, but it was okay. We put everything we had on it. We got it done. We got it to shelf, and it only lasted I don't think it even lasted 6 weeks on shelf. And timing, whatever, and it just
takes a license.
yeah. But it's one of those things where it happens. But the important thing is, I did the best I could. We got it to shelf. You'll know this with product designers. That's the ultimate. Is get things on shelf, whether it lives, whether it dies, whether it sells one, whether it sells a million. That's the key, because once you get that, that's a gold star right there.
Yeah. The problem with group projects in school is a management problem that doesn't usually exist in the professional world. It's in the professional world, that group would have a manager who would say, you do this, you do this, you do this. And if that manager should also know all her workers, and so she knows that you are just a workhorse that's going to just sit there and do all these runners. Like, she assigned that specific part of it to you. And if this person is more interested in that thing, they would divide the work up differently. In school, though, you don't have that manager, so you guys as a group need to decide who's responsible for what. Another thing that you might feel, another reason you might feel this way is I don't want to wait for everyone else to figure this thing out. I already have it figured out. I'm just do the thing, and it's just easier if I just do it and I don't involve other people. There's pros and cons to those things. It's good to be that person who gets the work done, but you also want to be wary of being the person that doesn't work well as in a team.
Isolate yourself.
Yeah. You might already know this about me already, but I struggle with interpersonal relationships. And so I sympathize with you, but there's great value in bringing other people into the fold. If you're in a group, make sure everyone's contributing, even if you have to step back and be like, what do you think? Even if you're like, I'm wasting my time, I could have just done this already. It's oftentimes more important to build the interpersonal relationships than go be like the superstar who just did all the work by yourself.
Yeah, I mean that's another topic, that could take another 2 hours. It's really about teamwork and collaboration, right? He's right. In a big company, you typically have a manager that do this, don't do that, do this. In a collaborative environment, even in a big company, you will get into a collaborative environment. You have to be in a collaborative environment. I think my advice to you is, do your homework, and be able to communicate yourself. Know that your design is strong. Know that you can communicate this clearly to your team members on why this is better, why I did this, why I didn't do this. Maybe we could try something else, right? So there's that kind of interaction and communication that's very important. And by the way, you can only do that via practice, right? This is something you really have to get in front of somebody, get in a team, and try it and fail and learn from it. So I think that's the most important thing for you is, again, don't take it personal, but know your stuff, know your design. Like, why is this better? like I always say, with the show that we're working on is anybody can come in with a great idea. Nobody can never ever come in and say, wait, I've got a better idea. If you have a better idea to make this better, I don't care who you are. There's no ranks, there's no, whatever. If you have the better idea always wins. So I think in a collaborative effort, you have to work towards that culture.
From what I've seen, everyone works differently. Some people will just put their headphones on, go into their cubicle, and just be like, I can't, don't interrupt right now. I need to focus and do this design.
Not disturbed.
Yeah, and some people can think about it, be chatting one oh, I got an idea to do a little thing. Everyone works differently, and ideally you end up at a place where if how you work is by shutting everything out and sitting down and focusing, that you have that opportunity, and people who you work with know okay, he's in work mode, let's not mess with him.
At the end of the day, if you hold up your end of the bargain, if it's a group collaboration, but you hold up your end of the bargain, I mean, you should be okay. Just don't be arrogant with it, I guess you could say. But as long as you interact with your group members, but you hold up your end of the bargain, and you're there to please the boss. You're not there to please everybody else, but you do what you got to do to get your check at the end of the day.
I'll actually add to that, as an instructor, I know you are as well, is the instructors know. We may not be managing, we know who did the work. You can see it, it's plain as day. More than anything, you can see who didn't. You can see who's not contributing.
The effort, yeah.
You can see the effort, and you can see it through the presentations. You can see it, so don't shy away from it. But what he was saying is know your stuff. Put your part into it, because that's what you're taking away from your portfolio is your part of it.
The interesting side effect of that is, long after that group project is over, you guys have all scattered to the winds. Those people will remember you for the work you did, and so maybe I was the one in the group that was slacking. But I'm well, I don't know your name, but I remember him. He was a hard worker. He did the work.
Picking up the slack.
I know Steed was always put 100% into every project he did. So when someone goes hey, we got this new guy we're considering hiring, oh yeah, I know him. He did the work. The converse is also true. The opposite is also true. When you're hey, we got this person, oh yeah, I went to school with that person. Are they good
Your name
workers?
gets around,
Well, the other thing is don't get bitter if somebody isn't pulling their weight. Either there's many ways to deal with this, and again, that's a whole separate course right there, which is how do you communicate that? Hey, are you not pulling your weight? Do you confront them? Do you pick up their slack? How do you? There's a multitude of ways to do it positively and get results, right? I'll leave you with two other things in terms of the busy work. For me, I always like to find the groove. I don't know what it is about me. Maybe it's the creative. I always like to have some ambient noise going on in the background, because to me, I always look for something that gets me into that groove, and that I always find that always helps me push through the busy work, because then you're just focusing and you're in the groove and you just get it done. Next thing you know, an hour later, it's finished. Great.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing if you're having anxiety about the amount of work you have to do, stop thinking and just do. Pick one, focus on it until it's done, put it aside, and focus on the next one. Those small achievements kind of set the clock for you about what you can and can't do, and you start to feel that anxiety go away if you just stop thinking about it and start working.
The other thing about deadlines too, also, never, ever miss a deadline. I don't care if you have to put a piece of
stay up all
circle.
night.
I don't care if you have to stay up all night, but especially if you're outside, working consultants and stuff like that. Never, ever miss a deadline. Get into that groove, get into that momentum, because the second you skip a deadline in the real world, it has catastrophic
It's not
career.
great, it's a job.
What's your line, Eddie?
It's better to be early.
If you're not early, you're late.
Yeah, so you want to be, yeah.
All right.
it's magical. Everything is magical. I mean, you go in and if you're at Mattel and you're in their design center, there's people riding unicycles with Nerf guns and having wars between cubicles with drones flying over your head. I mean, it's bonkers. It's so creative. Everybody in there is like you know, that everybody's exploding with creativity. I can't really think of too many drawbacks except, you know, that job was my first corporate environment with anything. So that was a little odd for me, but it was just because it was new. I would say it's so fun. It's really
toy
fun.
industry is very unique. I mean, as soon as you walk into any Mattel, Spin Master, you'll see a bunch of cubicles, right? But it's usually an open floor, huge space, and you just see toys everywhere. There's like, call them planograms. They're like store shelves with all their products, and there's toys, open toys. There's people playing toys, people trying to design toys, you know, trying to figure out mechanisms. It's like a giant Santa workshop.
Every designer's desk is encrusted with their favorite
Toys,
toys
yeah.
from their childhood.
Well, my answer to that is, you know, a toy designer is, the toy industry is one of the fastest paced consumer products design in the world, right? Because we crank out, I don't know, 2 or 3 product lines every year on the clock, usually between 6 to 18 months, depending on what company you're talking about. So from a designer perspective, we are one of the best consumer products, only because, number one, we're used to working fast-paced, we're used to working in a creative environment. I always say if you're a great toy designer, you can design anything, because a lot of the thinking, a lot of the processes are the same, and a lot of the behaviors and attitudes is the same, right? So in that respect, it's a great, not only is it incredibly rewarding, as these guys were telling you, you work on some fantastic properties. And sometimes you don't even know it when you're working there. Like when I was working on Street Shark, I didn't know what Street Shark was. I had no idea what it was, right? But now it's this kind of legacy, people love it, and nostalgic line and stuff like that. So, you know, it can be one of the most rewarding things, but ultimately it's up to you. But I always say it's one of the most rewarding designer job you can have, depending on how high you want to go. Because, you know, you can be a designer all day and you can go up to chief creative officer and all that other kind of stuff, but it's up to you. But it's extremely rewarding.
You know what you said reminded me something about working on properties. I'm a huge fan of Lord of the Rings, the books, and the movies, all of it. Like a big nerd about it. And
Not
then,
the Ring of Powers?
I watched it.
Yes.
And we did, when I was at Spin Master, we pitched for the license to do a game on the Hobbit movie when it was going to be 2 movies. They were still working on it. And I got to go to the studio and read the script before the movie had come out. And
There's perks.
oh man, that was great.
Oh, that's a whole separate. That's
Yeah.
a whole separate
Oh, yeah.
conversation.
Perks for everything.
Yeah, that's a whole separate
You
conversation.
have to walk away
That's a whole separate conversation.
products from work sometimes. Oh yeah, grab some stuff.
Yeah.
I have a ton of stories because I was head of I was the director of design for entertainment design when I was in Mattel. So I did all the Batman movies. You know, Chris Nolan was really cool. Going to London a couple of times, going to the set, and then Morgan Freeman
Someday.
walks by. Really cool. I met Guillermo del Toro. It was really cool.
Wow.
He was pitching us Pacific Rim at the time. Really,
Cool
it's,
perks.
yeah. I mean, well, personally for me,
Comic-Cons, toy
that's a nice thing about the toy industry is, you know, it's the pop culture world. You know, it's everything entertainment based.
toy fairs.
You know, a whole different drama there, but you know, but it is incredibly rewarding if you have that passion. The key is to have that passion.
Thank you.
Awesome. Do we have any last questions? All right. Thank you so much for spending time with us, telling your toy stories, and have a happy holidays.
Thank you.
Thank you.